So what we will do now is sort of cover each of these big data sets briefly, and like genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, etc. And later on we will come and look at genomics and transcriptomics, which are the two most abundant big data sets in little bit more detail. So as we were discussing, genomics is the study of total genetic information of an organism. Now if I were to take any particular cell from a human body, that will be the total genetic information. I don't need to check either, let's say, skin cell versus liver cells versus a neuron. Any cell will do, because the genetic information each cell of any given human body is going to be identical. So genomics can be done from any cell type. It is not dependent on the cell type. Most of the time, the way we do these determine the genomic sequence of the DNA, or the sequence of the DNA inside and in each of the cell, is to do a specific sequencing reaction, and the two famous ones are Sanger sequencing and next generation sequencing. Next generation sequencing is the modern technique. Sanger sequencing is slow and an older technique. So for smaller genomes, Sanger sequencing can be done, but for larger genomes like humans, next generation sequencing is the technique to go. What is it used for? It is used to understand and compare genomes. So if I can compare genomes, I will be able to tell what are the differences in the sequence of a genome, and we will look at an example in the figure below. It allows us to see what are the changes that are happening between different strains or species, and this is an important aspect, especially to understand developmental processes. Differences in different strains and different species allow us to see how evolution has progressed. So this is more on the fundamental science level, basic science level, and more importantly, it allows us to associate changes in the genome to different phenotypes, which can be various diseases as well. So it allows us to identify what are the mutations that are happening in the genome of a diseased patient more often than in a normal patient. So let's say, for an example, there's an infected person. We can take a sample, we can take a blood sample, we can take a buccal swab, which is swab inside your cheek, and sequence a particular sequence, right? We can sequence a particular sequence, we can sequence the whole genome as well. Either is possible. Then it goes through a sequencing machine. We will not go into details of what kind of sequencing machine is this. We'll see that later. But sequencing machine will give you the sequence of letters that the genome is made of, exactly the 4 same letters that we were discussing before, A, C, G, T. And what you can do is that you can compare this patient infected sample with the previously identified sequences and see what are the differences in here. So one of the differences that you see, that everybody had a G, but this patient particularly had an A, right? This is also variable site, but there is no particular association. So if these were normals and this was affected, so what you see is that this A variant mutation, instead of a G, so instead of guanine there is adenine in this sequence. It allows us to say that 1, 2, 3 are sort of similar, but the number 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4, number 4 is very different, and maybe this is the cause of why this patient is diseased. So that's an association we can make, but we'll discuss that in bit more detail later on. So that's with genomics. So it's one of the easiest ways of identifying differences amongst individuals of a population. So if you were to take large number of individuals of a population, you can actually study how much change is happening within a population, how different are each of the individual in a population is from the other, right? And if we now have a normal population versus a diseased population, sequence the normal population, sequence the diseased population, and compare the genomes to identify what would be the variants that are more common in disease sample than not in the normal sample, and those would be the mutations that could be causal for the disease or associated for the disease. And we'll see some of those examples later on. Next is epigenomics. As I said, epigenomics is the regulatory mechanism, right? Epigenetic modifications of a genome either switch on or switch off a gene. So this modification has on off output for a given gene, or it can be, when it's on, high, low, or a gradient as well, so sort of as a rheostat as well. So when you study these modifications, you can identify what are the aberrant or what are the epigenomic marks that are different. And in many diseases such as cancers or neurodegenerative diseases or autoimmune disorders, like autoimmune disorder would be lupus, or something like what should I call, rheumatoid arthritis. In those diseases, what has been seen as even though the sequence is not different between the disease and the normal person, the epigenetic modifications are different, and which means that the changes are not at the level of the gene sequence, but how it is regulated. If something was to be switched on, now the modification, something was switched on, now the modification happens and now it's off, which could be detrimental. Or if something was supposed to be off, now because of the mutation is on, that can also be detrimental. So this is the outcome of aberrant epigenomic or epigenetic modifications. So what are the techniques? One is called chromatin immunoprecipitation. We won't go into too much details, but you will see when you're looking at big data chip sequencing. Then we do a lot of mass spec analysis. You combine chip with NGS. This will be called chip seq. You can combine it with microarrays, then it will be chip. You can also do what is called 3C, which is chromosome conformation capture, which is another technique. So you really we won't go into details of this, but as you can see, as the number of epigenetic modifications is large, the techniques to identify these modifications is also much varied. And this sort of figure gives you an idea what do I mean by epigenetic modification. So in a chromosome, DNA is usually wound around what are called histone molecules. So histones are of 4 kinds, and they form a nucleosome, and around which the DNA is bound. So it sort of allows a compaction of DNA, long strand of DNA. And each of these histones have these tails which can get differentially modified. So they can get methylated, acetylated, like that. And depending on the modification, either the gene will be switched on or off. And this becomes different in diseases, and that's why we study epigenomics to see what changes are happening at the DNA level. Studying sort of this, if you think about this, you have genomics, you have epigenomics, and then you have transcriptomics. So by studying epigenomics, you understand why transcriptome of a particular diseased individual is different, because it gives you the answer to question why. Next is transcriptomics, which is, as I saw, it's generation of transcripts, so generation of RNA in a cell. Now, as we were discussing before, RNA inside a cell is the component of RNA. The whole set of RNA of a given cell depends on its function. So RNA of a cheek swab or a buccal swab, transcriptome of a buccal swab would be very different than, let's say, transcriptome of a liver versus, let's say, transcriptome of a skin cell versus that a transcriptome of a neuron. So transcriptome is highly variable and functionalized and specific to a specific cell type. So you cannot take transcriptome of a skin cell and determine what will be the transcriptome of a liver cell, whereas genome of a skin cell will be identical to the genome of a liver cell in a given individual. So what are the different methods? So RNA, if you are doing next generation sequencing, this will be called RNA-seq. If you are using microarrays, it will be microarray. You can also do single cell single gene level transcriptomics, which is qPCR. You must have heard the word qPCR a lot during COVID pandemic. What this can be used? Transcriptomics can be used to see what are the changes in gene expression pattern in cells in a very context specific manner. We will be able to understand if we do transcriptome of a liver versus transcriptome of a skin cell, we will be very easily able to tell why liver cell works as a liver cell and why skin cell works as a skin cell. And that is an important distinction to make, because if you are only going to study what are the changes that are happening in a liver cell, you need to know what is happening in a liver cell only. You cannot see changes in a liver cell by comparing it to a skin cell. So gene expression pattern differences can be seen. You can also understand splicing patterns. So as we saw, each of the RNA in eukaryotes has exons and introns, and we also saw a sort of a toy example of how exons can be joined in different sequences to give different sets of proteins. So splicing pattern become important. So sometimes by doing transcriptomics, you can identify that one of the combination which was commonly seen in a normal cell now is absent. Like if the sequence was 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, which is common in normal cell, is gone now. What you see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, which was absent in the normal cell. So splicing pattern differences can be seen. Similarly, RNA editing patterns can be seen. Many a time we see that different reading frames, as we saw, each gene sequence can have 6 different reading frames. Reading frames also change. So all of this information can be determined using transcriptomics. Now, once you know the context specific gene expression using epigenomics, you can actually also start understanding what is the difference in the regulation of that. And more importantly, something that we are recently realizing is that the phenotype is not only determined by the genes, so genes are called the coding sequences, but also by non-coding sequences, which are not, so coding sequence will go on to make protein. Non-coding sequences will only produce RNA and not produce protein as far as we know at the moment, right? So this will be RNA and then protein. Here there will be no protein. So, but non-coding sequences produce RNA, and that RNA has functions. So one of the more famous RNA molecules are called microRNA, which act as fine tuning mechanism of gene expression. Right? So microRNA is one of the non-coding RNA which you can now determine using transcriptomics. So in this schematic, what it is trying to show is that you have control, you have a disease population, and you have the other population. You do RNA sequencing, you check the differences in expression. You can see this is a set of genes that is not getting expressed in disease individuals, and in the other this was the one which was opposite, but now this sort of is different. So by doing computational techniques, you can start figuring out what gene expression level changes are associated with disease. So, this set of as the disease progresses, this subset of genes become lower and lower expressed, in sense that they become suppressed as the disease progresses. So, if a treatment has to be devised, it would probably mean that we need to express these genes. Maybe these genes were protective genes. These genes allowed the disease not to progress. But as the disease progresses, these genes go lower, and therefore by boosting the expression of these disease, maybe we can cure the disease. So that's the whole idea. So that is transcriptomics.